Well, hello and welcome to my After Hours podcast and channel. And this is my 31 days of Halloween. Tiffany here, and I'm here with longtime friend and musical partner, Laura Mason Lockard. Laura and I have worked together on music for a few years now. And we're in a couple of music groups together, Wayward Companions, Celtic Spirit. And but in addition to music, Laura is also a very talented writer.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. and she also has had her experiences with the paranormal. So I figure since this is spooky season and this is my 31 days of Halloween, this would be a great time to maybe dig a little bit more into that side of her. So, all right. So I know you and I have had several discussions about, your paranormal experiences and everything.
Yeah.
And so you've been having them though since you were a child. So what was your earliest, I would say, the earliest one at least that you can recall of your paranormal experiences?
Well, I would say the earliest. It's not the most dramatic, but in elementary school, back in the day, we spent a lot of time running around in the woods.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was an area back there that was really, really weird. And you go back there and it was like all of a sudden it was just like completely quiet. There's no birds, there's no animals, and then if you were there for a while, you would start to hear the sound of like all these bees. And it was like getting louder and louder and louder until you got freaked out and you ran away. So, years later, I was talking to my sister, who was 20 years older than me. So she had the same experience in the same place, 20 years apart, never talked about. But then years later, had read somewhere that, in the Iroquois nations, one of them were the beekeepers.
Oh, okay.
And, Linda said that when she was younger and the houses were new there, they used to have a lot of weird experiences with entities walking out of the woods and rattling the door at night, or like red lights flashing all around the room at night. Or she said one night she woke up and saw a red face in the mirror.
Oh my goodness!
Our theory always was that something happened back there and they were haunted by Native Americans.
Okay.
Not the most dramatic in the world.
Yeah.
I think for me the first actual true paranormal experience would have been in 1979.
Okay.
And I was 9 years old, and it was in February, and I looked this all up on the internet, so I know it's accurate.
Yeah.
And, Christmas had ended, all my brothers and sisters went home, and so it was depressing and miserable and dark and lonely, and I had to go back to school, and I hated school. So
it's like who didn't hate school growing up? It's
So I had this cool lucid dream one morning, and I was in my parents' house, and there was a cemetery out in the yard, and I would often have this dream, and I later came to kind of understand that this sort of meant ancestor contact.
Okay, yeah.
So this song comes on in this dream. I'm like enjoying this song, whatever, and then my mother comes along, wakes me up for school, and ruins it. So I grumpily get dressed, and I get downstairs, and I sit down at the table, and back then I used to listen to Jack Vogt every morning on the radio.
Okay.
So Jack Vogt comes on, and he's like, "Hey, this is a brand new ABBA song, and we just got this record, so I'm gonna play it for you for the first time." He puts it on, and it's a song from my dream.
Wow.
And I'm like all excited then. I'm like jumping up and down. I'm like, that's a song that's in my dream.
So you dreamed an ABBA song before it came out.
And so they shut me out the door, and I tell my little friend Chris, I'm like, you're not gonna believe what happened. And I just dreamed the song before it came on, and then it came on the radio, and Chris was like, wait, we will not discuss this at school.
Oh man!
Because that's how you get your ass kicked.
No, wow.
Back then you did.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the woods because I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, up Mountaintop, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area, and that area it's all woods. I mean, there's some city areas, especially if you go in downtown in downtown Wilkes-Barre, but up where I grew up in Mountaintop, like it was like pretty much all woods. Even like if you lived in suburbia, like in like a suburban area, you still like you couldn't escape the woods. And there were these patches of, there was like this woods in the, actually in the back of a friend of mine's house, like one of my childhood friends. And she was just like scared to death of those woods. And years later, she and I were talking, and she was just like, there was something in those woods that just
You could
was
just
not
like
good.
feel
Yeah,
it,
you could
watching
feel it. Feel it. And even the house that she grew up in, she said she did not like going into the bathroom at night because she just felt like there was just this, you know, this presence there and everything. And yeah, like years later, like, you know, she and I were talking about it because, like, you know, of course I used to like sleep over at her house and everything. And, you know, I would want to tell ghost stories, but she, you know, she wouldn't. And years later,
too close.
you're too close for comfort. Yeah. But like, yeah, because like my babysitter introduced me to the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark trilogy. So I mean, like she, you know, they, you know, she would bring them over. I don't know if my parents knew or not, but like, but yeah, but there, you know, and then it's like, you know, we would like sometimes go out back where the woods were and like read those stories and everything. So, yeah, so it was just kind of like, when you were mentioning the woods, it was, you know, it was just kind of taking me back to those memories as well. And yeah, and why my friend would never want to tell ghost stories, because I would always have fun doing that with my babysitter. So I would go to my friend and be like, oh, hey, let's tell ghost stories. She'd be like, no. And I'd be like, really? Like, really? Why? But years later, when she and I were talking, would be talking about, you know, all that, you know, that she kind of felt in her house and everything. I was like, oh, that's why you never wanted to tell ghost stories, okay? But understandable. And I know that you said that there were actual ghost stories that your parents and grandparents actually told you, and those should be interesting. So
Yeah.
what are some of those?
Hey, so my father's mother, lived until I was 14, and it was, they were a lot older than me. So my parents were old when they had me, and my grandparents were old when they had my parents, which makes my grandparents Victorians. Okay,
Ooh, wow.
So Grandma was born in, I think, 1896, and so when she grew up, she lived in Ohio in this little place called Rose Farm, and it's still there.
Okay.
It's very weird. You can look it up. It looks exactly the same as it did when we used to go to reunions there in the 70s. It's kind of creepy. But they had come over from Scotland when she was born in the United States, but her older sisters were all born in Scotland, and they had bought this farm. And there was a cemetery on the property that didn't belong to them. It belonged to whomever had owned the farm before them, because there weren't public cemeteries back then. And so you tended to bury your family on your property. You had a cemetery on your farm. And so apparently you could see this from their back porch. She said one day her sister was sitting on the back porch with her bow, okay, and they saw a white, transparent couple appear in the center of this cemetery and walk right through the fence.
Oh, wow.
It's like, oh, creeped out.
Oh, yeah.
And so then her other story about this little cemetery was, so her and her little brother were running around and getting in all kind of trouble, and they sat down on one of the headstones to like dump the stones out of their shoes. Yeah. And while they're sitting there talking and making noise or whatever, this voice comes, please go away and let me rest.
Oh, wow.
They were so scared. They took off running, and you know, they had just mowed down like corn and cornfields, and it was all sharp, and they ran on it anyway because they were so scared. And I mean, there's probably an older kid sitting around there screwing with them.
There might have been.
Nevertheless, she was convinced that something told them to get out of there. They were making too much noise in that cemetery.
Yeah. Wow. That's that would be pretty scary. Yeah.
And then the third one with her, which I had an interesting intersection with, was like, so her husband, who had been my grandfather, died in 1964, which was before I was born.
Yeah.
And he was a coal miner, and he died of black lung, which
Okay.
happens to a lot of these guys. And the story was that right after he died, she walked into their bedroom and he was standing at the foot of the bed. And I remember hearing that. And of course, it didn't occur to me to ask her, so what did you talk to him about?
Yeah.
That's what we really want to know. But, so many years later, I was taking a nap in my house. I was a young adult. I'm laying in my bed, and I have this great lucid dream. And I had my little Eskimo dog laying beside me in the bed. And I wake up on this couch in this house that I don't really recognize, but I recognize some of Grandma's furniture. And I sit up, and like sitting in front of a window with a bright light is my grandfather and my grandmother. And I recognize them from photos. And it was like, wow. And so not knowing what else to do, my dog was there too. So I picked the dog up and I put the dog in his lap and he's petting the dog and we're all talking and visiting. And I said, well, I guess the dog's not afraid of ghosts. And they all crack up.
Oh, man.
So then, like, I could feel the dog starting to growl next to me in bed in real life. And I knew in a minute she was going to bark and wake me up.
Yeah.
And so we all stood up like we were about to leave. And I just remember I gave him a hug. And, I said, I'm so glad I at least got to meet you once. Yeah. And then the dog barked and woke me up. And the thing, I remember how tall he was in relation to me. I remember how his shoulders felt. And he was wearing this really unusual shirt. And I happened to be picking up my sister from the airport that afternoon. And I picked her up and I'm telling her about this cool dream. Yeah. And she looks at me really weird. And she said, well, you remember that story about Grandma seeing him in the bedroom after he died? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, she said he was wearing a shirt that she made for him when they were first married.
Oh, wow.
And he was wearing that shirt when he showed up in my lucid dream.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty cool. And I mean, if I have like a reading, he always shows up and he tells the psychic that he sings that coal miner's daughter song. Oh. It's Grandpa.
Oh man, but there's it's always interesting, like just the stuff that like your family and everything will tell you. But when you mentioned that, go away and like let me rest and everything, there was also even like in the woods where I was growing up. Now this was like a friend of mine's older sibling that experienced this. And, because, and suppose, obviously everywhere there's like Native American burial grounds and all that stuff. And sometimes you don't always know where the burial grounds are.
Yeah, so they didn't have markers.
Because they didn't have markers. So, and of course you can always do the best you can to, research and see like where you're moving to or wherever it was built. But sometimes like even with your most due diligence, you can't. Because like you said, they didn't have markers, and depending on how long ago, it happened and everything, depending on how long ago, like the person, passed on, whether it was in battle or something like that. Sometimes you don't always have, you're not always going to know. So, so this was like a friend of mine, her older sibling and her older sibling's friend were actually in the woods, and it was maybe like late afternoon, close to early evening and everything. And they actually started to hear like this drumming sound, almost like this very like, cool. Almost like a Native American drum. And like they were sitting there listening, and at first that they were like, oh, is there, I don't know, maybe some type of like Native American thing going on in the woods and everything. But, and so they tried to follow the sound. But it was like the more they followed the sound, it was like it would get closer, but they would not like really see where it was coming from. So it got to where like there were like more than one like drums playing, and it was like again, like very like kind of a Native American, and they started to hear like little chanting and everything. Like, and then like they, once they got to a particular part in the woods, and then it was almost like when they got to a particular part, I'm like trying to remember like what my friend's older sibling told me, but it was like it was then it just like stopped completely, and then they heard this voice go away, you don't belong here, all that stuff. So they immediately just booked it out of the woods. So it's really like, I think woods, especially when you go up into the northern parts of like the US and Canada, and and even like going up, if you want to go to like Norway, Scandinavia, like those areas, it's almost like, well, especially Canada, because the vast majority of that is woods and where like nobody really lives. So it's almost like what's in there, and even with the ocean, we don't have any idea. So it's almost like, when people have like Bigfoot sightings, and I was just at the Mothman Festival, like, not too, like this past weekend and everything. And like, there's like, the Mothman sightings. And then there's like, especially when you get up into northern Canada, there's like the Wendigo and all of those. And it's just like, all of these like interdimensional, beings that, I mean, the thing is, it's like there've been so many sightings just throughout the centuries and a lot of people, they claim to have seen the same thing, especially like if you talk to like Native Americans, especially like, or like the indigenous tribes of Canada that are familiar with like the Wendigo and everything, it's really, it just kind of makes you wonder. It's like, because I was talking about this with a friend of mine, it's like, that I was at the Mothman Festival with, and it was just like, what would you do if you ran into the Mothman?
I'd be scared shitless. Ghosts don't bother me, but that, well, you don't know what his intentions are. Although, I mean, I've heard so many stories, I think, that a lot of these Native American spirits entertain themselves in the afterlife by messing with white kids. Because so many people, although I have heard it said that a lot of us are reincarnated.
Yes.
And my mother had a good story about that. So they tended to be a lot more into like this, reincarnation and sort of paranormal stuff, because my great grandfather or grandmother, was an Appalachian magic granny.
Okay.
And granny magic is kind of a amalgamation of like what the Scots Irish brought over here from their native and the Native American. Because when they got over here, there's this like ancient pagan religious traditions that they were still carrying.
Yes.
They really kind of jived with what the Native Americans had.
Yeah.
So they, sort of amalgamated and blended
kind of
together.
Like the German powwow.
Yeah, my mother had a bunch of them too. That's one of my great grandmothers, and it was all powwow medicine. My mother had a lot of powwow medicine. So when my mother was born, we kind of have the same genetic trait in that we remember being very, very young. I can remember my first Christmas, and I was 3 months old. So her earliest memories, she was just like really shocked at how white everybody looked. Why are these people so white? How they're so white? That and hating wearing clothes, and like she would just take them off. So like one of her sisters, or this her full-time job, this sister, was to follow my mother around and make sure she kept her clothes on. So my mother was only 3 or 4 years old, and so this would be in like the 1930s. And she went down to the creek, and she decided she was going to make herself some pots. And she dug some clay out of the side of the creek, and she made her little pots, and she had lined them all up, and she was getting ready to light a fire so she could fire her pots. And my grandpa comes down, and he's watching this, and he says to her, they're all dead. Just like looked at him like, what? He said, all the Indians around here, is what they called them, they're dead. The white man came along, and they gave them blankets that had smallpox, and it was an epidemic, and they're all dead. So you're one of us now, and you're just gonna have to get used to it. And then he left.
Oh man.
So I guess because his mother was a magic granny, they believed in reincarnation, because this guy was born in 1884. Where would he have ever heard of reincarnation back then, except through her? And so my mother also had these experiences, and her other big one that she told me was that So it was Easter in 1956, and they were at my dad's sister's house, my aunt. And they were all sitting around talking, and her husband was there, and he worked for Alcoa, and he was an executive, and so he traveled a lot. And so he had to catch a flight that night on Easter Sunday to go somewhere for work. And they were sitting around talking, and they somehow got on this macabre topic, Easter, I guess, of how you don't want to die, right? And my Uncle Grant had said that he thought the worst way to die would be to be burnt to death. Ooh. And on that lovely note, my parents gathered up their kids and went home. And
on that cheerful note, you know.
And Grant got his suitcase and head off to the airport. Well, the way home, my mom said she was just overtaken by this horrible sense of anxiety. It's like almost couldn't stand it. There's something really wrong somewhere. Like they get home, they walk into the house and they turn on the TV and it's on the news. So there was a plane that crashed off of the end of the runway at the Pitt Airport, and it was his plane. And you can look it up on the internet, and it's in there. It was on Easter Sunday, 1956. And that's exactly how he died. That plane caught on fire.
Wow.
We hope he died before he died.
Yeah.
So, and then afterwards, and I actually put this in my book because it kind of goes to show you what my mother thought about ghosts.
Yeah.
You know, she was down at my aunt's house because at this point my aunt was now suddenly widowed and was completely freaked out and been given, like they did in the 50s, some Valium. So she could go to sleep.
Okay,
all right?
Yeah.
So Aunt Ruth was out and my mom was sitting in the kitchen with Aunt Mary.
Okay.
And my two cousins, Kenny and Karen, were supposed to be in bed in their bedroom. And Karen wanders out. She says, "Oh, I can't go to sleep." And my mother's like, "Why?" She says, "My dad's in there." And my mother looks at her and says, "Well, you weren't afraid of him when he was dead. Why would you be afraid of him? Well, you weren't afraid of him when he was alive. Why would you be afraid of him just because he's dead?"
Yeah.
And she kind of thought about that for a minute and then went back in the bed.
Yeah, he's my dad. What's he going to do?
What's
he different? Probably just there kind of watching over you, you know?
So then, the third and final good ghost story for Mom is that, like, so again, if you read my books, we talk about the ant farm. She had three sisters who moved back into the house where they grew up, which was part of a little farm, to take care of my grandparents when they were old.
Oh, the ant farm because it's your mom's sister. Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody called it the ant farm. And then one of them, she had a boyfriend and hung over there, and he was the aardvark. Okay. So, very fun group of people. Well, in the 1990s, they all started to die off, and my mother was finally left with this house that she grew up within. She had to clean it out, and it had like 2 or 3 generations worth of junk in it because nobody ever cleaned anything out. She's up in the attic, running the vacuum cleaner, and at that point, the windows had been sealed shut with not screen, but like storm windows, so that all the heat didn't go out of this place.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't any way to open the windows, get really hot in here. And he's vacuuming, and so all of a sudden she started to feel like really, really sick. And he's just thinking, "Oh shit, I'm getting heat exhaustion. I'm gonna pass out up here. I'm gonna die. And they're not gonna find me for a couple of days." And all of a sudden, this ice cold column of air just envelops her. It felt so good. It was like air conditioning. Just relaxing. I was like, ice cold column of air. And I sat down in it and just like, after a few minutes, she felt better. She could get up and go downstairs. It was one of the aunts or my grandmother come back to save her from dying of heat stroke.
Yeah.
Your ghost can make a cold spot.
Yes, there you go. And which of those stories like stayed with you the most that like really, I guess, did any of them impact you in any way or?
Well, I'm sure in a way they all did because, as life went on, I had my own experiences.
Yeah.
I have to kind of say, the thing with my grandfather, because, I always felt so bad and I never knew him. And it was like, thanks to that story and that dream, I had a connection to him because everybody said he was just the nicest grandfather ever. And he was great at candy, and I always felt so sorry for myself that I missed this guy.
Yeah. So in that way, you got to experience,
Yeah.
knowing him and everything. So yeah, aw. And now you've written a couple of books.
Yep.
What are their titles?
Okay, so there's two. All right, they're actually the same story in two parts. So the first one is See the Light,
Okay.
and the second one is Finding the Light.
Okay.
And in a nutshell, so when I was 11 years old, I was abducted and assaulted by a guy that the police thought was a serial killer.
Oh.
Later.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had what you would now describe as a near-death experience.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's all detailed in there. And so after I had the near-death experience, then the ghosts started to show up a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Quite the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was my grandmother who showed up to kind of like take care of me. And then another ghost that eventually my mother recognized.
Yeah.
And I found her story in the historical record. So the second book has her whole story in it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Nice. So you kind of document that and like how, how that came to allow you to have those paranormal experiences and everything because there's like a lot of, you always hear about like people who have had near-death experiences and then like after that it's like they're completely opened up after that. Yeah.
Lots and lots of woo. It kind of ebbs and flows, and I've actually considered writing a third one, maybe call it Embracing the Light, about how like these experiences help you cope with like the eventual loss of one's entire family, because these people are a lot older than me,
right?
And I was pretty young when I did the math to realize like they're gonna be gone for most of my life.
Yeah.
And so when these people all started dying off, there were a lot of very strange but comforting experiences too.
Yeah, kind of like, especially with like that family knowing that, hey, you know what, we didn't get to be around for like most of her life, so we're going to, they'll come to you,
show up in dreams.
I had
a friend who's affectionately called to call them collectively the spooks. So did you hear from the spooks lately?
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you dreamed about one of your ancestors who fought in the Civil War.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I must have talked to him for 45 minutes.
Wow, yeah.
And a lot of it again, it's you kind of remember the gist of what you talk to somebody for 45 minutes, but you can't really, lay it out word for word. But I remember I did ask him, so what's like the big thing that we wouldn't get about the time period that you lived in?
Right.
And he said, well, social class. Okay. That in his time period, social class was like everything. And people don't get that now.
No. Well, I mean, even, one of the things that, even me doing, living history and, reenacting and, doing, frontiers person at Depreciation Lands Museum and then, being at the John Neville House and doing like your higher class and everything. It really, even just doing that just really kind of drives home just how classes and everything were separated.
It was very isolating.
Oh yeah.
And if you had a drastic change in fortune either way, it was really awkward.
Yeah, because you were new money.
If you didn't even have to be like rich, but just like from like one level of middle class to the next level of middle class, and it was like you kind of like your old friends feel weird hanging around with you. The new people don't know you.
Yeah,
it's like really hard.
Yeah, you're kind of in this weird little limbo here. Yeah. It's like, yay, I have money, but who do I hang out with?
So the other interesting thing he said to me that stuck with me was that the other side is like the internet. That it's technically everywhere, but you have to have the right equipment to perceive it. At which point I said, so tell me, how does a guy who died in 1902 know what the internet is? And he laughed and he said, well, we can keep up with stuff if we choose.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, there's even theories about how the past, present, and future is happening simultaneously. And this was a theory that I entertained when I went to Gettysburg, and I actually had a couple of experiences. One of which included being on a Gettysburg ghost tour, and when we came to one of the battlefields, and this was at night. There were no reenactments, no fireworks, no nothing, and you can hear cannons and war sounds being fired throughout like the battlefield, and everybody's there, and there were no speakers or anything like that. So like, and everybody's there like.
So it's like, wait a minute, you hear that? Yeah.
Well, that's what our entire group was like, because at first, even like the tour guide was like, didn't want to say. Even the tour guide was like, yeah, I didn't want to say anything just because I wasn't sure if it was only me, and everybody, our entire group was like, we were like. Yeah, none of us wanted to say anything because we didn't know like if we were the only ones hearing that, or if we're gonna look nuts or whatever. But like that was only like one of a couple experiences I had in Gettysburg. But the thing with Gettysburg too, and one thing that I've thought about is that it's like you kind of wonder if it's like kind of like in the show Outlander, where there's like this rip in time or something like that, and you're kind of like you're just you can hear the past happening as you're standing there, or is it like residual energy? Because I do think that there is a lot of residual energy up at Gettysburg, just because of because that was a very traumatic time for the for like just the country and like everything in general, but I think like Gettysburg has a little bit of all of the above, like it has residual energy, it has, actual, it has actual spirits, it has, probably even like those little kind of tears in time where for a brief moment you can experience, the past in one form or another. And there's even, and I'm sure you've read of it, people who have like actually seen time travelers for like a split second, like somebody from like another time, like for a split second, and the person from like the other time is looking like around confused, and then they disappeared. And then, so like, or people from our time, for like maybe a couple of seconds, stepping back into like the Victorian era, or even earlier back, so I mean it's really really fascinating, when you think about, okay, like what really is around us,
Well, I always had a theory about the ant farm. And back to that, so the ant farm was sitting on top of a coal mine, okay, and this was the Harwick mine, and in, I believe it was 1902, 1906, very early in there. If you look up the Harwick mine disaster, you will see this mine exploded, and it was one of the worst mine disasters in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It killed almost 200 men.
Wow.
Underneath the house.
Huh.
And I sometimes have wondered if, that caused some sort of rift.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why, like, a lot of this ghostly activity centered on the ant farm. And I talked to my cousins, and they all have the same thing. Yeah. They dream they're at the ant farm with all these ghosts. You go to the ant farm, and there's all these people that have been dead for 30 years, and you're talking and whatever. And it's always focused on the ant farm. And I've often wondered if that's because, what happened with the Harwick mine disaster caused some sort of anomaly.
Yeah.
That enabled that to happen.
Yeah. Well, like, even, getting back to Gettysburg, there, like obviously the Civil War and everything, and that was a very just traumatic time for a lot of people. I mean, it was very, very brutal. And, kind of like how sometimes like somebody having a near-death experience can like open them up to like everything else that's around us, having like a specific area that had something really, really brutal and gruesome happen, that perhaps like, that can cause like something of a rift, it's somewhere in like the time, like in time or something like that, And one area of curiosity for me when it comes to that is Bosworth battlefield where where Richard III fell, and Henry Tudor.
That would be really
that would be
see.
really interesting, I think, to go visit that and just see, okay, like, am I getting, and just just to see if I would have the same experience that I would have that we had at Gettysburg, except I don't know if they would be using cannons, but you would probably be hearing like, a lot of like horses and swords clashing and men yelling, and so but it's so fascinating when you go to these places that had just something traumatic happen, and something's like being played over and over again, whether it's residual energy or something happened to create almost like a ley line or something like that, where there's almost like this little, like, kind of like in, like I said, in Outlander, where you can kind of hear the past, and you can experience it for like a little bit of a second,
I've actually tried to research that. Like, are there ley lines in the United States?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're like ancient Native Americans building stuff and lining up with ley lines, kind of like they did over there. I've never been able to find a definitive answer on that, because I would always agree, are there ley lines down there in the woods?
Yeah.
Or crossing at the Amazon. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting to know. So apparently they're everywhere, but nobody bothered to map the ones in the United States, so they're not on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll have to like go to Europe or some other place where they actually did map them out, or But what do you have, like, a favorite Halloween tradition, whether it's from your childhood or now? Or
I usually say Halloween is one of the holidays I have like no negative baggage.
Yeah.
So like back when we were kids, we would all like get our little Halloween costumes and a big gang of kids, and we just range for miles trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Pitch black. They're out walking around with their little flashlights, laughing and carrying on. And you get home like 10 o'clock at night.
There you go.
Like, it was so much fun. And I could just remember walking along and you'd look up and see like a meteor streak by. We just had so much fun back then. And then we had this little tradition that I assumed everyone in the whole world did, but apparently not. So, of course, we were in the middle of nowhere, and we were surrounded by all these farms and woods. And the one grew feed corn, which feed corn is not like the corn you eat, it's hard. Okay. So we would grab like a couple ears of this feed corn and break it all off from the cob and put it in a little sack, and then you go around at night and throw this shit at people's houses. And if it hit like aluminum siding, it was like really loud.
Yeah.
I mean, not enough to like do any damage.
Right.
But really loud. So you'd like, and we called it going corning. Right? So you throw this corn at somebody's house and then run and hide. And you're really lucky they'd come outside on their porch and swear and fire a shotgun up in the air.
Ooh, yeah.
It was disappointing if they just ignored you, because that was a trick to getting us to go away. You ignored us, we would go away. And I remember one night, it was in the 70s, we had ponchos, and ponchos are perfect for this. You have your poncho on, you pack corn underneath your poncho, and creeping along the road, and there's like homeowner standing right there. So my friend Chris says, "Nice night for a moonlit stroll," and then we walked away and took off. Busted.
Oh,
crimson fisted out corning.
Yeah. You don't get corn, sorry. Oh man.
So it was nice when they were willing to play along like that. You do something to scare us. Like if nobody ever did anything, it would have been really boring.
Yeah. So corning is a favorite pastime of yours.
I haven't been corning in 40 years, but
in 4 years?
40.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 4 years. I was
we
like,
can't run anymore now.
I was like, wow.
There are a bunch of old people hobbling away really fast.
How are you getting away with that? Especially, now with, where everybody has like a security camera.
Yeah, really. They'd be all over.
Oh man. So what do you have any Halloween plans like this year or?
Yeah, mostly I just like enjoy watching scary movies.
Yeah.
It's like I don't really have any kids anymore. I used to take my son trick or treating. That was a lot of fun. And we don't get very many trick or treaters here because we're on this main road.
Right.
If you try to trick or treat here, you get run over by a truck.
Yeah, we don't want that.
So it's a little low-key now, but maybe someday I'll get invited to something really fun. You never know.
Hey, yeah, you never know. So as far as like your work goes and like your books and everything that you've got like going on and everything, where can people find it? Where can people buy your books?
So they're on Amazon. If you look up either See the Light or Finding the Light and Lockard, Lockard, they'll come up. I'm also just in the process of launching a YouTube channel to kind of talk about these various topics around the books that are not in the books. Okay. And so the first series, of course, is on perverted church dudes.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Series on perverts from church.
That should be
ones
interesting.
I've known personally, and a few one from history. So, and then I may move on to more ghostly things, but it's feminism and culture and ghosts and things related to my book.
There you go. Yeah.
And it's called Screaming into the Void.
Oh, is that your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel.
Okay, Screaming into the Void. That's a cool title.
So
How'd you come up with that?
That's what I feel like I've been doing for the past few years.
Screaming into the Void. I was going to ask how you came up with that.
Well, fighting back against sex abuse in the 1980s, and now here we are, surrounded by red pill dudes. So we've been screaming into the void, and nobody's listening. But there's always hope for the future, so we keep going.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So cool. And that's gonna launch soon.
Yeah, it should be out by the time this video goes live, actually, because I've got the first one ready to go. I'm gonna upload it as soon as I have one more picture.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Well, thank you very much for sitting down with me and everything. And yeah, this was a lot of fun, and it was cool talking paranormal spooky stuff with you and everything. And I'll leave your like book links and everything in the description. And and you said you're possibly writing another book.
Yeah, I'm toying with that idea about the paranormal stuff, but I am also recording audiobooks, so hopefully be soon.
Yeah.
I want to get that all done first and get the channel launched, and then we'll think about it, because my corporate overlords have put me back to the office for 4 days a week. So I don't have a whole lot of time for myself, but we're doing the best we can.
You're doing the best you can, kind of moving along and stuff. So, all right, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, this is the After Hours channel and podcast and my 31 days of Halloween. And until I'll be uploading every day in October. So I'll see you in the next video. And until then, stay spooky and happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Yes.